We have panelists from 4 different countries and 2 continents here. And we have at least 2 innovation professors around the table. That's why I can't start without asking something about innovation. And if you want innovation, you need to take risks and accept failures. I would like to ask quite you, is risk avoidance in Europe defense organization holding back innovation? And if so, what can be changed or perhaps learned from the United States?
Mm-hmm. Scott is here. Scott.
Scott, please.
Yeah. Can you answer that?
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'd be careful about thinking that we have it all figured out in the U.S. We do it reasonably well, we think, but there's always room for improvement. Definitely, anytime you get into risk aversion, you're going to cripple innovation. We think of innovation as moving fast and breaking things. In the defense sector, that's still true, but you have to balance it with the fact that people are going to die. Maybe the people you don't want to die if you get it wrong. So if you're building an app, you can get it out there half-baked and see if it works or if it doesn't work. If you're building a weapon system, it needs to be a little bit more mature probably before you take it out there. So there's always a healthy balance and tension between risk and reward and moving fast. And we hope that by doing a better job of allowing these young technologists to interact with our forces out in the field during exercises, training in Ukraine and actual combat, we can speed that up, but there's always going to be some tension between risk and speed.
But there is always a connotation that in the US people would take more risk and in Europe less. What about the Russian war in Ukraine now? Has it fostered this risk-taking in Europe as well, as just to need to move fast?
I think so. I think geopolitics and the situation in Russia and Ukraine is causing Europe perhaps to move faster than they have in the past and take a little bit more risk. Again, there's always a balance between operational risk and political risk. If something goes wrong, somebody's career might be on the line. The reason we innovate so well during wars is because it's entirely driven by actual battlefield outcomes. The system responds to what's happening on the battlefield, and then the minute we turn into peace, everything tends to gravitate back up to central control where there's a lot of risk aversion. And we refocus on efficiency and compliance rather than battlefield effectiveness. So that's something that we see in every society, but I think Europe is definitely moving down towards more risk being acceptable.
Sigute, do you see that Europe is more innovative now over the last few years?
Yes, of course I do see it. I myself actually contributed to that as well when I worked for the government. And I saw how much the situation in Ukraine actually affects the need to innovate and how much it transitions, what changes the mindset of the military as well. And of course, when you have an example, and then you can have an example nearby, not in the US, which is far away, which is very large compared like to Lithuania, for example. But you have an example nearby in the country that has the same fear, the same needs, and the same survival instinct. And then I think the military also communicates much more and then understands that this is the only way to win in the battlefield is to innovate. So we understand that we have to be open, and this is not easy because for decades it was not the case. For decades we were very close and they did not want to let anyone who they don't know in. So now this mindset is changing, but to change a mindset it takes long time, or something happens which is really bad and we don't want that to happen. So I can see how the military in Baltic states are transforming towards openness and towards accepting sort of level of risk, but it's still a far way to go until we will reach the level that would help startups because, what every single startup needs is not R&D money. Actually, we need the procurement. And to get the procurement is so difficult. Then I helped to develop that system in Lithuania. It looked so good and so flowy and easygoing. Now I see from the practical point of view, it's so difficult to get the procurement. It's almost impossible.
But Jamie, you are from the Kingdom side. You are now out from the EU as well. Is the procurement more easier now in the Kingdom? And have you become more innovative now?
I wish it was so. I mean, I think what we recognise, certainly in the UK, and the lesson from Ukraine is if you're on a very limited defence budget and you've got to get sort of 10x increase in operational impact, which is where our head of our army is looking. You've got to fix your procurement systems. What I would say, I think, is on risk, is I think we tend to treat risk as a thing, and actually part of the problem is that risk is siloed, and you have different silo managers, each competing to move their bit of risk down to the zero. So you've got a commercial guy who's trying to say, oh, there could be no commercial risk. The security guy trying to get the security risk. Some health and safety guy getting the health and safety risk. The effect of all that risk to zero is huge risk for the operator and the soldier at the front line. So we're not willing to take risk, for example, on a commercial contract. The effect of that is a soldier has to sit in a trench under mortar shelling without a drone or any sort of protection. And until we move towards not so much being risk takers, but risk managers, and take a holistic view of risk and have one person owning the risk across the whole of the capability, we're going to fail. And that isn't happening.
But should we then rotate people from tables and offices to battlefield in order to teach them how to manage risks, not avoid them? Or what works?
Well, without risk of saying it, we certainly need to be reducing the length of communication between the technology company and the user and the front line. And we're seeing that very, very effectively done in Ukraine.
But have you seen also kind of shortcuts without these public procurement systems, etc., directly basically to the market?
So the problem is that the shortcuts are often the ones that cost are those for the people with the deepest pockets. So if I can hire a retired general, I get a shortcut. So what we need to be doing is building procurement systems, and I, like you, have been in a government innovation cell, and I thought it worked, and it didn't. But is to be really clear what it is we're trying to achieve, what is essential, what is desirable, what's cost effective, and get the user and the company into one loop. And that's the sort of like design principles that doesn't exist outside Ukraine.
Yeah, actually, Scott, I have the next one for you, because you are also from CDL Estonia, being here several times, and we have in Estonia the situation where half of our Ministry of Defense went all to the tech companies to work with new innovations to help Ukraine, etc. But more in generally, how do you think about how should we approach in Europe with the talent strategy? Should we go and try to compete with these big tech giants, or should we teach our local students here, and local talent, nurture them? We will next see our bachelor student doing a startup in defense. So what is your take on this? How should we approach in our talent strategy?
So I wouldn't overmanage it. I think talent goes where it wants to go, and that actually circulation of talent is extremely healthy. For a very long time, the U.S. system has essentially been locked down, and people who are bureaucrats stay bureaucrats, and people who are military seem to think that they have this grasp on all things military, and then people in tech didn't want anything to do with either of the other two. Yeah. Now we're starting to see circulation between them. I think one of the most overlooked parts of World War II and our victory there was that you had this sudden influx of people who were drafted in at all levels. Right? The CEO of GM becomes a 3-star general in the Army in charge of procurement. So you have this incredible talent mixing that comes in, and they generally don't want anything other than to get the war over with and get home. But that mingling, if the more you can bring those together, we should actually encourage people to cycle between government, tech, military, and the military shouldn't really think that you have to have done only military things in order to be credible. The U.S., to their credit, over the last couple of years has started to do more of these fellowships where they bring people from industry in. We're starting to do a better job of managing our reserve forces and having officers who are in the reserves actually bring the talent, the capabilities that they do for their day job into the military. So yeah, the more interchange we can get, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, but it is like, being like true opposites. I mean, the security or defense innovation being seen as something, very secret, safe, closed behind the doors, very expensive also, all that. And now we have like seen this, and what you are also saying, the talent is rotating, and we see massive amount of startups, also emerging. We see competitions of procurement in Europe where they're like overbooked by many defense startups, right? So what would you say in general, and I will be asking this question from you about US and from Sigute about the EU maybe, are these R&D investments now going to right place? Because we have venture capital following the startups, and also startups applying for different R&D grants. So what would you say? Are they really like critically correct sectors, correct activities, correct innovations where the money is moving?
Right. So I think the further left you go, so the further towards research, the harder it is to tell if you're funding the right thing or not. If 90% of startups fail, imagine how much research has to fail to get to that one unicorn thing that really goes, because so much less is known. In the US, at least, over the last couple of years, there's been a real focus on the 3 to 5 year time frame of getting research commercialized and productized and into the hands of operators. That's great. The downside is that we're kind of killing our own feedstock. We're not looking 30 years out anymore. DARPA isn't looking at so much at DARPA hard projects that are almost impossible. They're looking at what can I field soon. And so there is going to be a gap in that research becoming products down the road. We're making trade-offs. Yeah, it's hard to target. I think what you do is you set the incentives. And to Jamie's point, it's really hard to organize and process your way into innovation. You just have to set incentives, and the process, what you do with organization and process is make it possible to innovate. You don't mandate it. A few years ago, the Navy came out with its innovation guidance, and it was like 200 pages long. I mean, I doubt that Google has a 200-page innovation guide that tells you how to do this. But once you set the incentives, if you put a lot of money, I would put a lot of money down in the operational forces, but then require them to, and take almost all the requirements off of them with regards to cybersecurity, and you can't buy Chinese, and you can't do these other things. Let them do whatever the hell they want with it. Try it, break it, play with it, figure out how it fits in the operational concepts. Then the stuff that you actually buy, you can put through the control processes. But as part of that, make them brief their seniors and make that a big part of their promotion cycle, so that there is more career risk in not innovating than there is career risk in maintaining the status quo. Right now, it's really risky to do something different because you kind of take yourself out of promotion running if you have a failure. We need to flip that on its head and say, as long as it was a calculated risk and you did something different and you learned something that we all benefit from, excellent. Those are the people we want in senior command jobs.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sigute, what do you think in Europe?
I think in Europe, the biggest problem is that R&D money is not aligned with procurement cycle. So it must be this way in order for startups actually at least to have a hope to have a procurement. And in Europe, we have like innovation uptake mechanisms, which are like official. It's pre-commercial procurement and innovation procurement. But at the same time, it's quite difficult to do actual pre-commercial procurement. It's not only that it takes very long time to prepare for it and then finally to execute it, but it's quite also difficult because especially for the institutions like public authorities which never done it. And even though the pre-commercial procurement should be originally from defense derived, but in reality, even for the defense procurement agencies, they have a lot of procurements to do which are standardized procurement. And how much do they want to dig into innovation procurement, which is completely different? That's a question. And even if they do, then they need to have a talent and so on. So as an alternative to this pre-commercial and innovation procurement cycle, it might be like Miltech sandboxes or defense sandboxes. But at the same time, I think that countries which are not very large in their territory, like Baltic states, I have a feeling like we have to have like specialized sandboxes so that not to repeat, rather to cooperate with each other. And those sandboxes also should be like not only, well, we have sandbox and then funding. No, it should be also aligned with the procurement cycle and the needs that the military will have from their own industry. And you know, when you look at everything in systematic way, only then I think it works. Because if you have separate measures and separate instruments which are not combined or which are not followed by each other, it's very difficult for a startup to, from R&D project to transform to actual procurement. Not to mention that to sell, it's extremely difficult itself.
Yes, and we had talks in our CDL meetings that if you are already on a procurement as a defense innovator, you are too late because you have to be before the procurement starts, right? To get your innovation on the market. But let me ask a question for Jamie, because you are like working across the ocean, you know both sides. So if you would kind of have to decide who must lead this defense innovation, are these governments, are these businesses, or international collaboration of, let's say, similarly minded governments and businesses?
So let's just start with international collaboration, because I think it's a trap when it's done by governments.
Yeah.
And you see it classically by the defense primes. I'm going to design this new fighter system. It's the next generation. We're going to lock you in. We're going to lock you the UK, we're going to lock you Spain, we're going to lock you Italy, and we're going to lock you Japan into this fighter program. And none of you, you're now locked in, because now you're in, you're letting your government counterparties down if you fall out. That's, for me, okay, it's about cost burdens, but you're locking people into a very expensive program. It's not really about innovation. Where I think innovation and collaboration is really interesting is at the micro level. So I was in Ukraine last week, or 2 weeks ago, and I saw a company that had cracked, in Germany, a German company, rockets that can shoot down the fast Shaheds. They built that system in about 3 months, and it was about 1,500 euros a shot. Fantastic. To find a defense prime that could operate at that speed and that cost, can't do it. The bit they couldn't do was the AI targeting system. Okay, well, how do they do that? Well, they talked to a bunch of other small companies that did software. And it's whichever company could fit their software inside the front end of that rocket and get it to work and integrate it, which is not actually a particularly difficult challenge if you understand, how to fit a Jensen NVIDIA chip into a rocket. You then get an effect. You get an operational effect that is low cost and high impact. What's not to like? No government involved. So what I suggest is the way we want to be going with procurement is around the route of imagination. Let's move away from procurement. We've just had a procurement disaster in the UK. £7 billion spent on an armoured fighting vehicle from General Dynamics that does not work. It will not work. In fact, it's not harming the enemy, it's harming our own soldiers. So let's just put that. It had 1,200 requirements placed upon it. Best will in the world. No engineer is going to solve 1,200 requirements. You can't do it. What you can do is imagine a system that would operate on the battlefield. And you can sell that system, that concept, that idea to someone. Ingvar, we just had from Vegvis here, has got an idea about how you would integrate his battlefield system into a tank. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Was Ingvar's system required in the Spartan tank? No. In the Ajax in the UK? No. No one wrote that down. But he's got an imagination, and he's beginning to understand what would deliver effect for the soldier in the front line. Yeah. But the same is true of the commander. The commander is confronted by a particular operational circumstance. In Afghanistan, it was one set of circumstances. Sat on the gap, close to Napa, it's another set of circumstances. Yeah. What do I, as a commander, need to react to what the enemy is threatening me, or in Ukraine, what is the enemy throwing at me? I have an imagination, and I can see, and I have an understanding of what the technology sector can provide for me. So what I want to be linking is imagination with imagination to deliver effect. I need to test my assumptions. I need to trial it. I need to trial it both in laboratory grounds, and there are no testing ranges for tech companies across Europe. It just doesn't exist, whether it's a missile or an EW system. But if I have that, and I can then start to deliver operational effect at a low cost, and I can't on the current systems.
Yeah, and actually, I will have a final question for you all very shortly, because we will have later today a session what we can learn from Ukraine, and I cannot just help myself in asking you what, from your opinion, what we have learned from Ukraine in terms of innovation mostly so far. So who wants to start? Jamie.
There's so
You
many.
just ended.
So when you say, have we learned the lessons of Ukraine? If you talk to any Ukrainian company, they will tell you the frustration of sharing their knowledge with European governments and technology businesses. You know, they want to operate, you know, they will tell you how to harden your drone for the electronic warfare environment. Is anyone listening? No one's listening. And so there is something here about getting IP into circulation, the collaboration as we've spoken about. But I think the really interesting thing is that we talk about drones from Ukraine. That's the wrong lesson. The lesson is how to react quickly and leverage your industrial base to get stuff to the front line quickly. And that's what the Ukrainians have mastered. Their ability to, they have technically savvy people because they've a volunteer army, people with sort of STEM skills are in the military, and they've got that circulation flow. But their procurement systems, which are devolved, are able to score, to gamify what makes the difference. So if I have a low-cost system that kills Russians, I get points. Other people in other units can now see that system, and they can buy it because it works. As the environment changes and as the situation changes and our countermeasures changes, obviously those scores will fall off and something else will come along the line. That is so different from going through a Ministry of Defense desk officer with a whole load of political decision makers above him or her and trying to reduce what is complexity to a sheet of paper or worse, a PowerPoint pitch deck, and then make a multi-billion decision around what I am or not going to buy for the military over the next 10 years. It just doesn't work. And we don't have any money, but the money we do have, we're just blowing away on misspent procurement projects because we have misunderstood what it takes to deliver impact at the front line.
Yeah, so quite hard words, right? Would you like to add something, Scott, Sigute?
I think that Brave One is another organization that we should learn from in terms of how to uptake innovation, but also how to bring innovation to the battlefield. And they are doing a really amazing job. I mean, they are really amazing, and the system and the concept that we have, but also the people. And if we want to learn how to promote defense innovation in our country, I think we should ask Brave One for help, and they will definitely, and I'm sure they would help and explain how do they do it, but also they are open for cooperation, international cooperation. So if national innovation, defense innovation units would like to, they would also help, to accelerate access to Ukrainian battlefield, because how sometimes companies, they don't know how to get to the Ukraine, or they are looking for people who know people. But actually there is national organization which is dedicated for this, and that's official and formal way. So Brave One is the organization that we all need to learn from.
Yeah, okay. So would you like to say something very short?
Very short. What we've learned is, what we've relearned is that the next war never looks like the war you thought you were going to fight. And so adaptability is the most important capability, which really kind of summarizes what they said, right? Your structure and your incentives have to be all around how fast can I change, how fast can I adapt to the situation, not am I bringing the right thing to the fight, because you're not, guaranteed.
Thank you guys so much. It was so interesting. But now we are actually going to have a lunch break, and let us be back at 2:00 p.m. sharp.